for tuning in and for being here in person and online. I'm Vanessa Walkup, and we are here today with Angela Alioto, mayoral candidate.
Mayoral candidate, right.
And Angela, we're going to start by just asking you to introduce yourself to the community.
Okay. Hi, I'm Angela Alioto, running for mayor. I'm a third generation San Franciscan. I am the mother of 4 and the grandmother of 5, which is very, very cool, the joys of my life. I am, the last 17 years, I've been a civil rights trial lawyer in the courtrooms throughout America. And then the 8 years before that, I was president of the Board of Supervisors and a supervisor that wrote, I had a wonderful office at City Hall. My staff at City Hall, we did some amazing legislation. We did the first smoking ban in the United States and now in the world. Banning smoke in the workplace, specifically secondhand smoke, but smoking in any workplace. And then we did about 27 pieces of legislation on smoking. We specifically did the legislation that stopped Joe Camel from being eye level in any grocery store because it was attacking children, and it was very successful in the percentage of addiction that went down for 11, 12, 13-year-olds. We were really excited about our Joe Camel campaign. And then I did the medicinal marijuana. My husband died of stomach cancer, and when he was dying, UCSF had given him some medicinal marijuana, and it really worked. And then when he died, and then when they took it away from him a month before he died, I was stuck in the situation of being an elected official and not being able to get the marijuana. So a year later, I legalized medicinal marijuana for anyone who had any kind of fatal disease or any kind of painful disease, because it was a miracle for my husband. I saw the difference. He could come down and have dinner with me and my kids. It was a totally different situation. That was a tough piece of legislation to pass because people thought it was pro-drug. And so in different communities throughout the city, that was a big deal, but we got it passed, and it was the first medicinal marijuana in the nation. I did a lot of laws that have to do with children. I wrote the children's budget, which bifurcates a certain amount of money out of the general fund budget. At the time, our budget was $2.9 billion. Today, as I heard last night, the mayor said it's $11 billion, which is shocking. But at the time that I was president of the board, it was $2.9 billion. So I bifurcated an amount out of the budget. I could go on and on, by the way.
Yeah, go.
So is that okay?
Yeah, you're welcome to go on.
So for children, for the children's budget, which, by the way, is still in effect today, the board members did not want it. They did not think that children should have certain facilities that I thought they did. And the same thing happened with the youth commission that I created. I just met a youth commissioner here, and it's always great to meet them because they go on and they do great things, having had a start in politics. But I took both of those both of those issues to the ballot, and the Youth Commission won with 72%, and the bifurcation of the children's budget that pays for before school and after school programs, specifically art and sports, that one passed with 78%. So it was really wonderful to see that not only did both of those issues, the people of San Francisco wanted them so badly that the 70% out, but that today they're still in effect. In other words, we did something that can't change, and it's just wonderful because families in San Francisco have just disappeared. It's down to 14%. When I was board president, it was 30% families in the city, and now it's down to 14%. So I did a lot of legislation for HIV. We were in the middle of the HIV/AIDS epidemic. I was the chair of the Health Committee for the whole 8 years, even while I was board president. And I also did a lot of legislation for women. Like at the time, chronic fatigue syndrome was not recognized. It's principally an immune system disease for women only. Generally speaking, it's women only. And doctors were not recognizing it because, it would be, oh, get over it, go home, you're not sick. And meanwhile, they'd be totally exhausted and deflated because the immune system was so low. So we recognized it, we had hearing after hearing, and then we made all of the medicines for chronic fatigue syndrome for women available through the system, our healthcare system of San Francisco, for all of the city employees. So that was another really successful piece of legislation that today is still going. So I did Chinese alternative medicine, I did chiropractic, I had a lot of things included in payments that the employees were not getting that today are still there.
Wow, that's incredible.
I could go on and on, especially on the HIV, but I'd much rather have questions or see what you all are specifically
Well, I know you
interested in.
spoke about families leaving the city
Right.
and kind of this mass exodus that we all are feeling. And so I'd love to talk about some of the topics that parents have presented to us and they really want to hear your opinion on.
Wonderful.
And that will help to keep them in the city. Top of mind is homelessness
Right.
and clean streets in San
Right.
Francisco.
Right.
I also very much appreciate your time in San Francisco and that you do have such a history with
Right.
the city and you've seen different seasons of the city. So, what have you seen work and how are you proposing that we fix homelessness if elected mayor?
Okay, first of all, I got in this race because of the tents. I worked with homelessness in the 2000s with Gavin Newsom, and we were very, very successful. Our 10-year plan to end chronic homelessness was a huge success. We housed over 4,600 chronically homeless. Those are people that are embedded in being homeless. Very, very difficult to get chronic people off the street. Much easier to get someone who's been on the street a month, 2 months. Much easier, much easier. It's even easier to prevent homelessness. We subsidized their rent for 2 months, and subsidizing rent for 2 months kept people on their feet, gave them a chance to breathe, and then get back into getting their paycheck or get back into whatever the problem was. So that 2 months really prevented homelessness, and they dropped that in 2012. They dropped our buildings that were in the pipeline where we housed people. We had 18 buildings with master leases throughout the city. Those buildings were moved from the formerly homeless pipeline to affordable housing. Because when tech came to town, we all love tech, it's great, but when it came to town, there were not plans for affordable housing. So people were being kicked out of their units, and as a consequence, they took the formerly homeless buildings with master leases and made them for the new employees that came to town. So then you didn't have a place to take people. So Gavin and my plan from 2004 to 2012 was highly successful. I can't tell you how excited I am about the results of that plan. And the report that came out, it's on the city website, ccsf.gov. The report in 2014 of how very successful it was, and it also tells about how they defunded it and took the buildings out of it. And you can see in 2014, 15, and 16, a boom of new homeless people, and then the tents started in 2015 and 2016. So we know what works, and it's permanent supportive housing with a minute clinic on the bottom floor so that there's medical care, okay? Because a high majority of the homeless people are mentally ill. And we also know that over 85% of our people on the street today, 85, are on the street, not because they got evicted, 15% got evicted, so they're on the street, but because they got sick. They got sick. And there's a perfect example of an 80-year-old, actually the man's 84, she's 79, couple down at Moscone Park, Funston, down in the marina. They 3 months ago, they lost their housing, moved on their boat, then they lost their boat. And the reason they lost their housing was he had a heart attack and they couldn't pay for the medical bills. And so medical reasons is 85, that's a whopping number. I just got this number 3 weeks ago from the head of the homeless department, Jeff. And I was stunned that it's that many people. But I can tell you as a discrimination lawyer, you would be surprised how many, and specifically women and the elderly, people get terminated because they're sick. You get terminated, you lose your paycheck, you've got hospital bills, and you've got to deal with the illness. And I mean, you know, in my civil rights lawyering, you're dealing with people who can do the prerequisites of the job, and yet they get fired because they have cancer, because they have to go to chemo. Well, that's exactly, transpose that from a situation where they come to a civil rights lawyer, it's exactly why they're on the street, is because they got fired and wrongfully, and can't afford it.
Will you look to aid organizations such as Take It to the Streets, which Christian Klinsky
Yes,
spearheaded,
yeah.
and help to publicly fund an organization like that? Are you interested in the private-public funded approach to individuals on the street?
Yes.
I know Christian's looking at increasing the SRO housing and providing jobs to the community in the Haight Street
Right.
population.
Right.
And as a parent who's lived in the vicinity and close proximity to the Haight Street,
Right. Well, you know, I have to tell you something.
we've seen that work. We've felt safer.
Like Hamilton. Hamilton does a great job, okay? And as I understand, Christian does. But you know something? The city does a great job when the city focuses on it. You've got to focus on it and you've got to want to do it. It's a very hard job. Taking care of poor people in the street is a very hard, intensive job. Right now, we are a billionaire city, okay? And a lot of those billionaires are my good friends. For example, Mark Benioff is one of my closest friends from tech. Mark just offered $300 million in homeless care. If you combine someone like me, Mark, and Gavin Newsom as the governor of the state of California, you're going to have an amazing difference in homelessness. Because you're going to have people that want to roll up their sleeves, go out there, take people off the street one by one the way we did, and now we'd have the money to do it, and we have the know-how already with the permanent supportive housing. Yeah. We really have the know-how. And I met with Daniel Lurie also as another foundation that's just raising money to house people, and we will create coalitions with people like Mark Benioff, with people like Daniel Lurie, to house the poor. But I'm telling you that the combination of me and Gavin is powerful, especially with people that really want to help in the city. We never had that help. We never had a billionaire step up and say, I want to give you $300 million. He's already given $30 million for the women homeless housing out at Star of the Sea. I mean, his wife Lynn is really generous and caring about the women and children. We've got to get our women and children off the street. We cannot allow homeless children going to school. I mean, it's just, that's why I'm in this race. It's so disgraceful.
Yeah, thank you. And as we talk about women and children, a big topic in the Main Street Mamas community is finding affordable childcare.
Oh, yeah?
Yes. And, you know, we'd love to hear your position on Prop C.
I'm very supportive of Prop C. I'm very supportive of all of Jane Kim's efforts to make a difference in childcare, and she's been doing that for a while. And having said that, it's wonderful to see someone who doesn't have kids be so involved with children. So I'm very supportive of her Prop C.
And Jane did speak a lot about how her staffers did mold and shape the way that she thought about housing and education.
Right.
And, you know, having raised 4 children in San Francisco, how has that shaped how you think about our public schools? And also, you know, we talked about at the end of our time with Jane was the lottery system versus neighborhood schools.
You know, you have to understand that as much as some of the presently elected officials talk about the school system, there is no jurisdiction. You all know that, right? It's a state school system. We do not have jurisdiction to interfere. For example, we could not interfere and change their curriculum. We could not interfere. The best I could do was do the bifurcated children's budget that gave the before school, mid-school art classes and after school sports programs. So as far as actually changing the lottery and the locations, I have to tell you, we can talk all we want about it. And of course, a powerful mayor can make a difference in Sacramento, but that's a Sacramento issue. And as a consequence, it's extremely frustrating. As a civil rights lawyer, I have had so many mothers call me. And the minute I hear these stories, you know, it's like, I can't even believe these poor mothers have to live through this. It's hard enough having all the other issues that go along with children learning, from disabilities to you name it. I mean, one of my sons was totally dyslexic, and besides going to all these other places I was driving the kids, I'd have to pick him up at 1 o'clock and take him out to UCSF when he was in first grade, because everything was backwards. I mean, the hospital would always be the airport would, I mean, just not just the words, but the concepts. And so, on top of all of that, I would get these calls. There was one woman that had twins, and they had the twins at schools that were so far apart. So I called the school. I did everything I did. I could do. Jerry Brown's a friend. I called Jerry. I called everybody. I mean, called the governor. For God's sakes, could you please keep these twins together? I mean, I think that's like a very essential thing to do. And the mother was distraught, and I totally understood her. Well, it took 6 months, but finally they got to go to the same school. But it did take 6 months. Nobody was really listening to us.
Yeah.
So the lottery system is an issue. I mean, if you want really good public schools, then you've got to give parents the incentive to really want their kids to go there.
And we saw with Bloomberg in New York, New York really, public schools became an option for families.
Right.
And that's when you saw the turning of the tide in New York. So
right.
we hope that that's upon us in San Francisco.
Yes.
We'd love to know if you could name some ways in which you're supporting working class families in San Francisco. And I know this is, your bleeding heart for
yes, I am.
the working class. And families of color to not only be able to stay but thrive in this increasingly unaffordable.
Well, let me just say that as mayor, I will absolutely bring in the economic experts. As the person in charge of homelessness for so long, I went with the federal homeless czar. We got more federal funding from everyone from the vets to the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to the Secretary of Health to the Secretary of the Post Office even gave us money. The interagency involvement in homelessness is huge. And so we went and we got all sorts of money from the federal government. But in working on that, I went to the experts. The one thing I've learned is go get the people that know how to handle this. Affordable housing in San Francisco is a mess. It's a mess. Our African American community is down to a whopping 4%. It was in the 20s when I was president of the board, and it was in the 30s when my dad was mayor. Okay, Latino community in the last 4 years, 12,000 Latinos have been displaced and have left San Francisco. The percentage is just stunning, okay? So how do we keep them here is one of the most difficult questions, because even with affordable housing, Latino families and African American families tend to be families in the sense that they want family services, and so the apartment has to be more than an SRO. But it's a huge issue that I will definitely be calling the experts in on, because we need more density. I've agreed to the 5,000 more that Mayor Edley proposed. I absolutely believe in the more density issue. Affordable housing, let's talk about that for a second, because it was a mind-blowing education for me. When I first started in this mayor's race, everybody kept saying, well, the developer comes in, you give them 20%, 25% of it affordable, and everybody's happy. So it wasn't for like a month. I said, could you explain to me what affordable is? Because they were using it in a way that would never have included Latino families, African American families, or anybody that makes $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year. And that's not affordable. The definition of affordable in San Francisco is $130,000 to $180,000. And everybody's so happy that we're getting 25% of this alleged affordable. Well, affordable is not affordable to our families. It's not affordable to our nurses, our teachers. I am going to do dedicated housing for nurses, teachers, and emergency services. Dedicated housing, which means I'm really excited about this. And I stole the example from San Jose. I'm a big person on copying best practices that work. Austin, Texas has a great program. And the one in San Jose is 4 blocks from a hospital. They built 415 units specifically for nurses. And the rent is a percentage of the salary. So if one nurse makes 50%, and another nurse makes, 50,000, and another nurse makes 110,000, the percentage of the salary is the same. So everybody can live there no matter what they make, and they're 4 blocks from the hospital. So dedicated housing for nurses, teachers, the most underappreciated. My heart bleeds for teachers and healthcare workers. I don't know if you've ever had anyone sick, but my brother Thomas was sick and passed away last year, and very young, and he getting healthcare workers. was like so impossible, and the state was being so rough on the residential care, making these restrictions that made it almost impossible, such that over 47 of them, just in the Alamo Danville area, closed shop. So all of those people need to be able to live in San Francisco, where the sick person is, where the schools are. So we need dedicated housing for that. And that's one of my most exciting proposals. It really is. But as far as affordable housing goes, please believe me, I'm calling in the experts.
Great, thanks. I have one last question, and then we'll look to see if any questions are live, and we can ask from the audience. There's a lot of frustration around transportation and navigating the city as families, and Main Street Mamas people have been very vocal about this. As mayor, will you make community work better for families and invest in transit solutions, support bikes and pedestrians?
Yes. The one of the most controversial things I have said in this campaign, and it is most certainly something I'm going to do, is look at the department heads. There are 3 department heads: MTA's department head, DPW's department head. Have you ever noticed they're always tearing up the same streets? Really? And they happen to be the streets you need. And the rest of the streets are terrible. So we need someone to lead these departments who cares. So let's go back to DPW and MTA for a second. MTA's and DPW's directors make over $400,000 a year. Okay, that ought to boggle everybody's mind. That, to me, that's formidable. They need to be replaced with people who care about San Francisco. So let's go to MTA for example. Let's use this BRTs on Geary Street. This is supposed to be the rapid bus that goes right down the middle of Geary Street, that's painted red and goes all the way out to the ocean, okay? Everybody was so excited about that. First thing I started hearing from this were the elderly and people with families. So I went and met with them. And indeed, they've brought a lawsuit against MTA for doing this. And why do they think it's a problem? They're taking away 27 bus stops to do this. So if you take away, even if you take away 10 bus stops, the elderly and the families have to walk all those blocks to get to the buses. So I suggested, far be it from anybody to suggest compromises and coalitions. Those are the 2 things I'm going to excel in as mayor. The compromise would be have half of the buses be the rapid transit down the red line, and have the other half stop at every single one of those bus stops, so that the elderly and the families don't have to struggle more than they already do. That my suggestion hasn't been accepted yet, but it's certainly something I would do. And the scooters, that's outrageous. The dangers on the street for the elderly, dangerous for families. This is not a family-oriented government. It just isn't. And they don't think, oh, well, maybe the scooter on the street's not a good idea for kids.
Right.
Or for the elderly. They just don't think. But the chutzpah of the tech industry to go right over government to your telephone and put the scooters all over this city with never talking to anyone at City Hall goes to show how far they've gone to not need government at all. I would have collected every single one of those scooters, I would have collected them all and said, you want your scooters back, you have to come talk to us. We're going to put some rules. These kids on the scooters that are riding the scooters have to have helmets on. They have to be in the bike lanes. The bike lanes are getting bigger and bigger. And they can't be dangerous to anybody. They've got to. Today, we were coming over here, and this kid on a scooter went flying through a red light. So they have to obey the rules. Yeah. But transportation is a big issue, and I'm telling you, new department head in that department would make all the difference in the world.
Thank you. I think we'd like to go to live questions from anyone who's here today. Does anyone who's here have questions? Vanessa?
As a mother and a grandmother,
Yeah.
Can you give...
Oh, you look way too young to be a grandmother.
No,
but you are.
Oh, I was about to say.
But anyway, but thank you.
Yeah.
I am wondering what suggestions you have for getting our children more involved in being, good San Franciscan citizens, and how they can get involved with the democratic process, and also just feeling more connected in this very,
Disconnected world.
disconnected and very adult city.
Yeah, very adult city. It's tough. I created the youth commission,
Yeah.
as I was talking about, and my granddaughter right now, Kiara Mia, who's graduating tomorrow from SI, she is, so excited. Go, Kiara. I went to the Mass last night, and I'm so proud of her. She's the president of the youth commission right now. She was appointed 2 years ago by Mayor Edley, and her colleagues voted her in.
And where's she off to next year?
She's going to go to John Cabot in Rome, and then USC. She's really excited about USC. We live in Rome during the summer, so she's going to do the first year at John Cabot, which is a USC transfer school, and then move into USC in September 2019.
Wow, what an incredible opportunity.
Well, I think it's a really good life story for her. You know what I mean? She wanted to go away. I wouldn't let her go if it hadn't been somewhere she was raised during the summer. She knows Rome like it. She knows San Francisco. But to go back to your question, and she, of course, wants to be the first woman president of the United States.
Go, Kiara Mia.
Oh, Kiara's all over it. It's really tough because the tech issue. I mean, I see all my grandkids at the table, just fascinated with their computers. And like Nino and Augustus, they'll be playing games with each other on the internet. And so in one way, Nino lives in Sonoma and Augustus lives here. I'm delighted that every night they get 20 minutes together because they wouldn't be able to be together. But it's still a very isolated world when you're just with this computer. And I think what you absolutely need to do is find out what they're interested in, and then focus on that. For example, if they're interested in women's rights, or Kiara Mia is trying to get 16-year-olds to be able to vote, and that has made her be extremely outgoing on the youth commission. And she's also just kind of boggled by the fact that people don't think kids are smart enough to vote at 16. Well, that's the same opposition I had for the youth commission. We don't want youth commissioners. They're just kids. You know, they don't know what to think, basically. And that youth commission has been a real jumping board to going into politics and to being interested. I think having a president like Trump has gotten a lot of our kids interested in issues that they wouldn't have otherwise even known about, because some of his issues are so out there. So in that sense, it's good. As a matter of fact, when Kiara was applying for college, everybody was doing political essays, which all the colleges said that's never happened before. So they're getting interested in the politics. But you literally have to lead them by the hand and take them away from a computer to get them involved. And I think another really good area is sick people. Making sandwiches for people, going and handing them out in a safe atmosphere, going to Glide or going to Gubbio Project. It's really, when they see it, it becomes something they totally understand.
And what do you deem a safe environment for kids to? I know, soup kitchens historically, like it can be a hard environment for them to be in, but maybe St. Vincent de Paul here, or.
But it's safe.
What's safe? Yes, what you deem safe in the city, or what's a nice entry level opportunity for families?
The organizations.
Okay.
When I said safe, so many times, like throughout my life, I deal with homeless people one-on-one, and it's not safe for children to be doing that. It's not safe for people who don't know what they're doing to deal with homeless people one-on-one. You have to go to the organizations, to the soup kitchens, you shouldn't just go down to the Timberland and start talking to people, and obviously never unaccompanied. But in a safe atmosphere, because we've gotten in a situation where there's homeless, there's people that feed on the homeless and actually live on the street so they can feed on the homeless. There are feed on the homeless in the sense of there are panhandlers that are not homeless but fake like they're homeless. You have to bifurcate all these different categories of homelessness to know who you're really dealing with. That's how you house them too, and that's how you get rid of the people that are abusing the homeless situations, that are not homeless. But there's also been a criminal aspect of homelessness that exists now that did not exist 10, 15 years ago. Just didn't exist. This tent situation has caused it to have elements that never existed before. So I would never suggest children do that. But I would Gubbio Project is one of the best in town. St. Anthony's is formidable. You know, you go give turkey at Thanksgiving time at St. Anthony's, and it's something a child never forgets and gets involved. I remember when I was going to the Convent of the Sacred Heart in high school, it's funny, these things came back to me just recently. I used to go to a place on Fillmore and, Fillmore and Eddy. Now it's Walden House, but it was a place where all these kids were mentally ill. And I would go for 2 hours after school every day to take care of kids that are mentally ill in an atmosphere with supervision by adults. And obviously that stuck with me because I had been dealing with mental illness in the homeless and the sick my whole life. So obviously made an impression on me.
Do we have any other live questions? Do we have any questions online? No? Okay. So we can keep talking. Do you have any other pressing points that you want to speak to?
There's one thing that people don't realize. First of all, this is ranked choice voting. The mayor of San Francisco will be elected, okay? It may not be next Tuesday. It may take a week to even vote, even count it. There'll be time to vote for mayor in November. Wrong. There's no mayor's race in November. It's over next week. That's one thing. Another thing is, people don't know there's an election next week. You know, they're really surprised when I tell them that there's an election next week. And unfortunately, because of the governor's race and the senatorial races, it's called a primary. But it's not a primary for the mayor's race. There's no runoff. And the person that gets elected mayor has the potential to be mayor for 9 years, 9.5 years. Another thing I want to say about it is, I'm not going anywhere. I got into this because of all the tents and because I feel San Francisco's losing its soul. I feel, you know, we are an iconic city that is now got employees walking by, people shooting up and slouching over in their own vomit. It looks like a third world. It's inconceivable to me that this is the city I grew up in because I've never seen anything like it. And as a consequence, it's losing its soul. And if the person that doesn't become the next mayor understand that, you know, even down to, this sounds silly, but before Mayor Lee passed away, I was dealing with the flower stands. Flower stand people called me. And the city board of supervisors had done legislation that restricted the flower stands from selling the stuffed dolls and the little cards. Well, if they couldn't sell the stuffed dolls and the little cards, they had no profit. They don't have profit, they can't stay in business. And that's another thing I'd like to talk about. Our small businesses are dying. Sure. And so DPW, the guy I'm going to change, went out there with a truck and towed away our flower stands. Oh. Okay, one of them, the Hugasian family, had been in front of Gump's literally 80 years. I mean, it started with Harold Hugasian's grandfather. And to see the flower stands be towed away was just too much for me because it's symbolic of something going wrong with the soul of the city. It's like when they denied the Summer of Love permit. They grant all these other fancy events, but they denied the 50th anniversary of the Summer of Love. And why does that matter? It matters because it's the soul of our city. And it was denied on arbitrary, capricious reasons that were done by people who clearly don't understand who we are as a city. And so that's really what started getting me into all of this.
Thank you. One question that's come up is about the San Francisco native population and families feeling like if they are San Francisco natives that they're rarely listened to or heard. How will you make sure that we listen to the original people of this land? And also, do you support the Pioneer statue coming down?
When you say the natives, are you talking about people born here?
Born here, yes.
Are you talking about the indigenous people?
We're talking about San Francisco natives, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Born and raised.
A lot of categories.
Yeah.
You know, there's really an interesting poll on Nextdoor. And the poll says, will natives elect Angela Alioto? You know? And I thought, what an interesting question. I'll tell you, natives have come to me for a long time and asked native San Franciscans and asked me to run. But also I have to tell you, so many have left town. There's so few natives in San Francisco now, especially third generation like myself. I was fortunate enough to buy the house I'm in 1972. There's no way I could afford the house I'm living in now if I would have to buy it. It's a difficult city to live in, and so the native San Franciscans, have a lot of them have left town, and the ones that are here, of course, I represent them. I represent them big time because I know what the city was. And by the way, I'm getting very criticized for that because I'm being told, this nostalgia, make the city great again, which really annoys me that they would ever quote that like that. But there's a truth to, I want to see the city beautiful again. I want to see every type of family be able to live here, every level of income be able to live here, and I want the city to be safe. I'm a law enforcement person. I'm endorsed by the San Francisco Police Department. I'm proud of that. I have been criticized. Do you know my opponents did not even seek the endorsement? That's how bitter the relationships are. Mm-hmm. Well, you can't be the mayor of the city and not get along with your police department and get along with the community policing efforts of making communities and police come together. Mm-hmm. I just don't think you can. Let me mention one other thing that I haven't mentioned: sanctuary law.
Thank you.
I wrote the sanctuary law, so I'm getting criticized for it and I'm being called a Nazi now, I'm being called all these terrible things. Because when I wrote the law, I did not include felons. I'm a mother. I don't include felons. You know what I mean? It wouldn't even dawn on me to specifically go and include dangerous felons. Mm-hmm. So when David Campos and John Avalos went back and amended my law, in 2013, David Campos did ask me. He came and said, we want to amend it to add this. I said, absolutely not. No, I absolutely don't think we should be a sanctuary to dangerous felons. And so our ordinance, we just got the title and summary back. We're out getting signatures for it. And we need to get 9,432 signatures, but we're going to get 14,000 to have a buffer by mid-July. So it'll be on the November ballot. Now, one of the reasons I'm doing this is because so many of the families I sought to protect have asked for help because they're living in dangerous situations. Mm-hmm. Okay? That's one reason. Second reason was it was never meant. It was always meant for families, not felons. And third reason, if you look at the state of California sanctuary law, 800 felonies are exempted from the law. The California sanctuary law does not protect 800 sanctuaries, and it does not protect a jail or a prison. So if you are undocumented and you go get booked at a jail or a prison in the state of California, then the officials can call the INS. San Francisco's sanctuary law is so broad, it covers every category to come here for sanctuary. And there are certain categories, like dangerous felons, that we don't want to protect. So that's why I did it. But I'm being highly criticized for it. That's another area where being a mother, I think, makes a difference. And safe parks makes a difference.
Sure. And do you support police accountability for the crimes of police brutality?
Of course. I'm a civil rights lawyer. The police endorsed me, knowing full good and well I give my speech about the bad apples. You've got to get rid, and this is true of corporations too. I do a lot of sexual gender discrimination cases. And there's one massive corporation that you all know very well that keeps this one harasser, right? And I'm suing them every year. And so I finally talked to the head of the corporation and said, could you please tell me why you keep paying out these, because he makes so much money. So that's why they keep them, okay? And so sometimes in these organizations, and then this is rampant throughout the United States, not rampant, but it's bad enough, especially in some states we all know so well, where some of the higher ups are the ones that are the worst offenders, and they're the most difficult to get to let go. But the San Francisco Police Department, in my opinion, is one of the best in the nation. Police brutality should never be accepted, never. I cringed. Did you all see on the news yesterday the young girl on the beach where the police just walked up and just started smacking her in the face down in Monterey? I cringe. And the police department know that, and they supported me and endorsed me. So the goal there would be to get rid of the bad apples. And you know what else? Education, education, education. Teach people what is not acceptable. You know, teach them. Because maybe their parents didn't do such a great job in teaching them what to do. In fact, maybe their parents taught them.
And are you in favor of putting more police on the street to combat the petty theft that we're experiencing? Let's let Angela. Okay, we have 5 minutes. I'm just gonna let Angela have a sip of water. I just keep asking you questions and you're going for a sip. So yes, in favor of putting more police officers on the street.
I am for full staffing of the police department. We have 1,600 police officers. 300 are going to retire next month. Next month, June. I'm for full staffing, which is 2,200. I have always been for full staffing. We do not have enough police officers on our streets, on bikes, on horses, on motorcycles, in their cars. The tools and the equipment our officers have are out of date. The other day there was a very serious call, and the officer's car died, and he had to hitchhike to get to the scene because some of the cars are so old, and it's just a nightmare. But, you know, with police, I want to stress how important it is to intermingle and communicate with the communities. And it's not just the minority communities, with every community. Get to know each other, know who each other is, know your background. So it's never an issue where brutality would even enter the picture.
Does anyone else who's with us today have a question?
In that same vein, there's an uptick in burglaries and car break-ins in the neighborhood I live in. Never would have happened 10 years ago. And I'm wondering if there's anything that can be done about that, or what your plan would be.
Yes. Well, first of all, more police. More police would help. But let me tell you something. That this campaign's been an amazing education. One of my opponents in this race proposed this Prop 47. I don't know if you all know what Prop 47 is, but it takes felonies down to misdemeanors. So burglarizing, robbing a car, burglarizing a car, vandalizing a car is no longer a felony. It's a misdemeanor. We don't have enough police officers to focus on misdemeanors and infractions. We just don't. Now, the chief has created a squad specifically for these car burglaries, and they're allegedly down 15%, but I don't know that that's too accurate because you see broken windows all over the place. I do know the other day I was going to the Lombard Hill. There's many tourism here, and a whole van of police cadets got out of the van, and they were handing papers to everybody saying, put your goods away. Don't leave your computer. Don't leave your phone. So they're actively trying to prevent. And then at the same time, I got out of the car and walked block after block after block and saw so many valuables in cars. So, people have to take responsibility too. But I'll tell you something. It's very rare that my car doesn't get broken into in front of my home. It's very rare.
Right in front of the house.
Right in front of the house. And 2 weeks ago, my daughter Angela Mia and her family live in the garden apartment in my home. They just absolutely vandalized her car and took nothing. Mm-hmm. The CDs were all there. They took nothing. They just did it to do it. Right. But I do believe it's a criminal ring. I believe it's a criminal ring that is making a lot of money. We discovered all the suitcases at the airport full of goods, full of computers, telephones, and so it's obviously, a ring, and the ring has to be broken. But that Prop 47, I have to tell you, as a law enforcement person, I just don't understand it. I don't understand making child molestation anything more than a felony. It's beyond me. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys. That's
Thank
all
you
the
so
time that we
much.
have today, but I want to
Thank you
so much, Angela, for being with
I'm
us.
so glad I
and
got to do this as a
giving
mother.
us this opportunity.
It's the first time I've talked to mothers and
Oh.
fathers, and it's
Okay.
great. Great. Thank you so much. Thank you.